She was a doctor. She had saved children's lives. She had walked into rooms that were never built for her and earned her place in every single one of them. But that night, none of that mattered, because the moment she sat down at that table, that private, silk-covered table 42 floors above Seoul, surrounded by people who had already decided what she was, an older woman picked up her teacup, set it down with the precision of someone who has rehearsed cruelty until it looks like elegance, and said in perfect English, making sure every syllable landed exactly where she intended, "She looks like the help, the kind of woman who serves this table, not the kind who sits at it." Danielle Reeves, a Black woman who had never once asked anyone to hand her anything, did not flinch, did not cry, did not move. But the man sitting beside her did. And what Jang Min-Seo did next, no one at that table saw coming. Not his aunts, not his associates, not the guards standing at the wall who had watched this man conduct business in rooms far more dangerous than a dinner. Because this man, a Korean mafia boss with dragon tattoos climbing his neck, a man who controlled 3 cities and answered to no one, reached into his jacket, pulled out 3 black cards, and cut every single one of them in half, in front of his mother, in front of his entire family. And that was only the beginning. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click Join to become a member and help our channel. The restaurant had no name on the door. It didn't need one. On the 42nd floor of a building in Gangnam, there was a private dining room that existed, officially, in no record, no reservation system, no menu posted online. The kind of place where the food arrived before you asked for it, because the staff already knew what you wanted. And the kind of place where saying the wrong thing at the wrong table could change the entire shape of a life. Danielle Reeves had known about this room for 2 years. Min-Seo had described it once, casually, the way people describe a dentist's office, something necessary and unpleasant that you schedule and survive. She had filed it away, told herself it would never be relevant to her. And then the invitation came. She spent 3 hours getting ready, not because she was vain. Danielle Reeves had operated in underfunded pediatric wards on 4 hours of sleep. She had delivered news to parents that no parent should ever receive. She was not a woman who trembled at rooms. But she understood, with the quiet intelligence that had carried her through every space she had ever entered uninvited, that tonight was not dinner. Tonight was a verdict, and the jury had already decided. She chose the dark green dress, fitted but not theatrical, gold earrings, small, heels that said presence without saying, "Look at me." The black clutch she held with both hands in the elevator was the only thing she couldn't quite control. Min-Seo watched her from the doorway of their bedroom before they left. He didn't say she looked beautiful, though she did. He said, quietly, "You don't have to do this." And she said, "I know, but you do." That was the thing about them that no one in his family had ever understood, and probably never would. She had never needed Min-Seo to choose her. She had only ever needed him to know that she was worth choosing. There is a difference. It is the difference between a woman asking to be rescued and a woman standing beside someone she trusts while the storm arrives. The storm was already seated when they walked in. Park Hyun-ja occupied the head of the table the way a judge occupies a bench, not through aggression, but through a specific quality of stillness. She was 64 years old and had not raised her voice in decades, because she had never needed to. The women who surrounded her, 2 sisters-in-law, a cousin, the wife of an associate, arranged themselves instinctively around her authority, the way iron filings arrange themselves around a magnet. Hyun-ja looked at Danielle once, then she looked at her son, then she looked at her tea. It was the kind of look that says, I have already decided what this is, and nothing that happens in the next 2 hours will change it. The first 40 minutes were surgical in their politeness. Dishes arrived, tea was poured. Danielle answered questions in careful, measured English. Questions about her work, about where she grew up, about how she and Min-Seo had met. The way a person answers questions when they know the questions are not really questions. They are excavations. Someone is looking for the crack in the foundation. She gave them nothing to use. And then one of the aunts, a soft-spoken woman named In-hye who genuinely seemed to be trying, leaned forward with a smile and said in Korean, not knowing, or perhaps not caring, that Danielle had been studying the language for 18 months, that Danielle had an exotic quality that was quite striking. The table absorbed the comment the way water absorbs a stone. Quietly. Completely. Park Hyun-ja set down her teacup. The sound of porcelain on silk was the only sound in the room. And then, in English, chosen deliberately, every syllable placed with the precision of a woman who understood exactly what weapons she was carrying. She said, exotic is a generous word. She looks like the help. The kind of woman who serves this table, not the kind who sits at it. 11:07. The silence that followed was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of people who had expected this, who had, in some private corner of themselves, been waiting for it, and who were now watching carefully to see what it would cost everyone involved. The 2 aunts studied their plates with the focused attention of women who had learned long ago that the safest place to look during a Park-hyun-ja moment was anywhere but at the person being addressed. The associate's wife reached for her water glass and did not drink from it. One of the guards near the far wall shifted his weight almost imperceptibly to his left foot, then caught himself and went still again. Danielle did not move. This was the part that Hyun-ja had not prepared for. Not because she was careless, but because in 64 years she had never encountered a woman who received humiliation the way Danielle Reeves received it. Not with tears, not with trembling, not with the barely contained outrage that could be dismissed as sensitivity or instability. Danielle received it the way a surgeon receives unexpected bleeding during an operation. She noted it, assessed it, and decided what to do next without removing her hands from the field. Her fingers tightened around the black clutch in her lap. That was all. Hyun-ja, reading the stillness as surrender, continued. Min-seo could have married the daughter of Park Sung-ho, old family, educated, a woman who understands what this life requires. She gestured once, lightly, in Danielle's direction. The gesture a museum curator might make toward an item placed in the wrong exhibit. Instead, he brought this. The word "this" landed in the center of the table like something dropped from a great height. And that was when Danielle opened her mouth. She had a sentence ready. It was a good sentence. Calm, precise. The kind of response that closes a conversation without igniting one. She had rehearsed variations of it for months. In the shower, on the drive to the hospital, in the quiet minutes before sleep. She was ready. She never got to use it, because Min-seo's hand covered hers beneath the table. Not urgently, not as a warning. The way you place your hand over something you intend to keep. She looked at him. He was not looking at her. He was looking at his mother. And the expression on his face was one that the people in that room, people who had known Jang Min-seo for decades, People who had watched him conduct business in rooms far more dangerous than this one had never seen before. It was not anger. Anger was familiar. Anger was manageable. What sat on his face now was something quieter and more permanent. The expression of a man who has just watched the last version of a story he used to believe in collapse, and who is already, calmly, deciding what comes next. He stood slowly. He buttoned his jacket. Black, single button. The movement was unhurried in the way that only truly dangerous things are unhurried. He looked at his mother for a long moment without speaking. The dragon tattoos on his neck, black ink climbing from collarbone to jaw along the left side. The detail work so fine, it looked like something that had grown there rather than been placed, caught the light as he turned his head slightly. Several of the people at the table had seen those tattoos for years. Tonight, for reasons none of them could have articulated, they noticed them differently. "Repeat it," he said, in Korean, quietly. Hyun-ja's chin lifted a fraction of an inch. "I said what everyone in this room is already thinking, Min-Seo. This woman is not—" Stop. One word, no volume. The kind of stop that does not invite negotiation. He reached into the interior pocket of his jacket, withdrew a slim, matte black wallet. From it, he removed 3 cards. Black, no visible branding. The kind of card that does not advertise itself because it does not need to. Cards he had placed in his mother's hands himself years ago, without conditions, without expiration dates, without the thought that conditions would ever be necessary. He set them on the table in a neat row in front of her. Then he reached for the silver letter opener resting on the service table beside him, the kind kept at private dining rooms for correspondence, for ceremony, for the small formalities of people with old money, and he cut each card in half, cleanly, without hesitation. The sound was small and final, like something being signed. Hyun-ja stared at the 6 pieces of plastic on the white silk tablecloth. "The apartment in Gangnam," he said, "is in my name. You have 30 days. Hyun-ja's mouth opened. It was the first uncontrolled thing she had done all evening. In 64 years of navigating a world built entirely around men with power and the women who survived them, Park Hyun-ja had never once allowed her mouth to open without a sentence already fully formed behind it. That was her discipline. That was the invisible architecture of her authority, the pause before speaking, the breath before the verdict, the deliberate silence that made other people fill the space with their own anxiety and hand her the advantage without realizing they had done it. But her mouth opened now, and nothing came out. "The Woody Bank account," Min-Seo continued, in the same tone a man uses to read a grocery list, "will be closed Monday morning." "You would not." "I already called." The table had stopped pretending to be a dinner table. No one reached for food. No one touched their tea. The ants had achieved a quality of stillness that suggested they were genuinely considering whether it was possible to become architecturally part of the room, to be mistaken for furniture, for wallpaper, for something that had always been there and had no opinions. Hyun-ja looked at Danielle. It was a different look than the one she had given her when they walked in. That first look had been a dismissal, the efficient, practiced glance of a woman, cataloging a threat and deciding it was beneath her. This look was something else. This was the look of a woman trying to understand how she had miscalculated and finding, for the first time in recent memory, that she could not immediately locate the answer. Danielle held the look without flinching. This was the moment, and she would think about it later, lying awake in the dark, while Min-Seo slept beside her, with the particular stillness of a man who had made a decision and made peace with it. This was the moment she understood something about Hyun-ja that she had not understood before. The woman was not cruel the way cruel people are cruel. She was not enjoying this. She was frightened. She had been frightened since the moment Danielle walked through the door, and the cruelty was just the shape that her fear took when it had nowhere else to go. That did not make it acceptable, but it made it legible. And legible things, Danielle had learned, are things you can eventually work with. Min-Seo extended his hand to her. She took it, stood. He addressed the table one final time, not his mother specifically, but the room, the assembled witnesses, the people who would carry this evening forward into every conversation they had for the next several years. Danielle is leaving because she owes nothing to anyone in this room. A pause so brief it was almost not a pause at all. I'm leaving because I was raised to believe that family does not mean what happened at this table tonight. He looked at his mother for the last time. I hope you find a way to understand the difference. They walked to the elevator. The doors closed. Inside, in the brushed steel quiet of the elevator cabin, Danielle exhaled. A single long breath that she had been holding since approximately the moment the porcelain teacup had touched the silk tablecloth. She felt the tension leave her shoulders the way water leaves a cloth when you finally stop wringing it. Slow. Complete. Min-Seo was looking straight ahead at the closed doors. She watched his reflection in the steel. The tattoos. The jaw set at an angle that looked like control but was, she knew, something closer to grief. He had not lost his mother tonight. Hyunja was not the kind of woman who disappeared. But he had lost something. The version of the story in which his mother was capable of being better than she had been tonight. That version was gone, and he was already somewhere on the other side of it, which was the most heartbreaking kind of fast. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Her own words returned to him. He turned and looked at her, and for a moment, just a moment, the Jang Min-Seo that the world knew, the one with the dragons on his neck and the cut credit cards and the closed bank accounts, was not in the elevator. Just a man who had chosen something irreversible because it was right, and who was still deciding how he felt about living in the aftermath. I needed to, he said. The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened onto the Seoul night, wide and cold and indifferent and full of traffic and light, the city continuing completely without awareness of what had just ended 42 floors above it. They walked out together. 3 weeks passed the way the aftermath of significant things always passes. Not quickly, not slowly, but with a strange density, each day carrying more weight than its hours should allow. Min-Seo did not call his mother. This was not a decision he announced or explained. It was simply a fact that settled into the apartment the way cold settles into a room after a window has been left open. Gradually, completely, until it was just the temperature of things. Danielle watched him. She was good at watching. It was, in many ways, the core skill of her profession. The ability to observe without interfering, to read what a person's body was saying when their mouth was saying something else entirely. She watched him pour his coffee in the morning and stand at the window longer than usual. She watched him answer phone calls from his associates with the same focused efficiency as always, and then sit in silence for a few minutes afterward in a way he never used to. She watched him sleep. She did not ask him how he was feeling. She knew how he was feeling. She felt it too. The particular guilt of having been the reason someone else's world reorganized itself, even when the reorganization was necessary, even when it was right. She was between patients on a Tuesday afternoon, sitting in the small break room at the hospital with a cup of tea she had not yet drunk, still in her white coat, her hair pinned up with the same gold clip she had worn to the dinner, when the receptionist knocked on the door and told her there was a woman in the waiting area asking for her. No appointment, no name given, Danielle walked out. Park Hyun-ja was standing near the window at the far end of the waiting room, looking out at the street below. She was wearing a beige coat, simple, the kind of coat that existed without ambition. Her hair was down, not styled, just down, pushed back from her face with what appeared to be very little thought. No pearl necklace, no careful lipstick. Her hands were clasped in front of her, and she was holding them the way people hold their hands when they are trying to keep them still. She looked smaller. This was the first thing Danielle noticed, and the thing she kept returning to later. Not the absence of jewelry, or the plain coat, or the unstructured hair, but the simple fact that Hyun-ja, standing alone in a hospital waiting room without her architecture of power around her, was just a woman in her 60s who looked tired and uncertain, and considerably shorter than she had seemed 42 floors above the city. Danielle stopped a few feet away. She did not close the distance. She waited. Hyun-ja turned from the window. She looked at Danielle with the eyes of someone who had rehearsed this moment many times and was now discovering that rehearsal had not helped as much as she had hoped. The silence between them was long. Not hostile, just honest. "My son," Hyun-ja began, in English that was slower and more careful than the English she had used 3 weeks ago as a weapon, "has never taken anything from me. Not once in 38 years. She paused. Her jaw tightened briefly, then released. "Even when I made it difficult for him. Even when I was wrong." Another pause. "He took things from me 3 weeks ago." Danielle said nothing. "I have been asking myself," Hyun-ja continued, "since that night. Why? Not why he did it. I understood why he did it before the elevator reached the ground floor. I have been asking myself why it took something like that. Why it required—" She stopped. Started again. "Why I required that." She looked at Danielle directly. The look from the restaurant was gone entirely. What replaced it was something rawer and less composed. The expression of a woman who had spent 3 weeks alone with a mirror she could not turn away from. "I have spent 40 years, she said, "making sure no one could take my son from me. I built walls. I set conditions. I decided, very early, that love was something you protected by controlling everything around it." Her voice was steady but thin, like ice that will hold your weight, but is telling you something with every step. "I never considered that the walls I was building were the thing that would cost me him." Danielle breathed. She thought about the sentence she had prepared 3 weeks ago in the elevator, the calm, surgical response she had never gotten to use. She thought about the 18 months of Korean lessons, the 3 hours getting dressed, the clutch held with both hands, all the invisible labor of a woman trying to be acceptable to someone who had decided before she arrived that she would not be. She thought about Min-Seo at the window with his coffee, the silence after phone calls. "I love your son," Danielle said. "Not because of what he controls or what he owns or what he can do. I love him because the first time I was in a room where I wasn't supposed to belong, he looked at me like I was exactly where I was meant to be." She paused. "I don't know if you and I will ever be close. I'm not going to tell you that everything is fine, because it isn't yet. But I know that he deserves to have both of us. And I know that you know that too, or you wouldn't be standing here." Hyun-ja looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded. Once. Slowly. The nod of a woman who has lost an argument she spent decades winning, and is, for the first time, considering that losing it might have been the point. She left without embracing Danielle, without making promises, without the performance of reconciliation that would have felt false and that both of them, being the women they were, would have immediately recognized as such. But she left differently than she had arrived. That evening, Min-Seo was in the kitchen when his phone lit up on the counter. He glanced at it, set down his glass, read the message twice. He carried the phone to the living room where Danielle was sitting, her legs folded beneath her hair finally down from the gold clip, reading a journal article she had been meaning to finish for 2 weeks. He held the screen toward her without speaking. 3 words. From his mother. In Korean. She is strong. Danielle read it. Read it again. Set the journal article down on the cushion beside her. And then she laughed. Not the polite, careful laugh she had been deploying for months in rooms where she was being evaluated, but the real one. The one that came from somewhere below the rib cage, unannounced and unguarded. The laugh of a woman who had held herself together for so long that the release of it was almost indistinguishable from relief. Min-Seo watched her laugh, and for the first time in 3 weeks, the window distance left his eyes. He sat beside her, said nothing. The city moved outside their window, indifferent and continuous, the way cities always are when private things are being permanently resolved inside the buildings they surround. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He did not move. Some silences are the sound of something ending. This one was the sound of something, very quietly, beginning. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever walked into a room where someone had already decided who you were before you spoke a single word, and had to choose between defending yourself and simply standing in your truth with dignity? And have you ever witnessed someone you love choose you so completely that it cost them something they could never get back? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, loyalty, and redemption, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.